I'm excited to welcome you back to the Better Divorce Podcast. And just in case you don't know who the heck I am, my name is Paulette Rigo. Yes, I'm a credentialed private family mediator specializing in alternative dispute resolution and a certified divorce coach, which specializes in helping people who unfortunately go to trial and maybe even appeals like I did. Now, today, we're going to talk about a lot of juicy things because my guest, Patrick Kilbane, who's from Florida or resides in Florida, but works with people all over. So listen up, grab your notebook, and welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here, Patrick.
Thank you, Paulette. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for that super kind introduction.
You're most welcome. Well, you have a diverse background, and I want to really get into this conversation because you have a family law background or attorney background, and you're also a general counsel and a wealth advisor in a partnership called Ullman Wealth Partners. Ullman is spelled Ullmann. I guess this person likes double letters, so make sure you don't do a single L and M. And now he's also a CDFA, and those of you that listen to me usually know what a CDFA is. So this is an exciting topic because now we're coming up on summer and the kids are getting out of school and people are starting to go on family vacations. And what happens when you come back from family vacation and the kids go back to school? People start to think about their marriage and their family and what worked and what didn't work. And they start to have that conversation about perhaps considering counseling, therapy, and yes, the D word, divorce. My course, Better Divorce Blueprint, is launching in September for that exact reason. And many people ask me, Paulette, I don't know what to do. Do I need a lawyer? Do I not need a lawyer? Do I need a financial advisor? Do I not need a financial advisor? I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so confused. And so Patrick and I are going to give you a little clarity today. So Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, why you do what you do, because not everybody wants to help people through divorce.
Great questions. So I was born a month premature. So right out of the gate, I was a very impatient person and remain impatient. However, in this context, I find that I'm incredibly patient and I meet some of the greatest people in the world, as do you, Paulette, when they're going through probably the most difficult thing that they may face in their entire life. And in this context, 10 years of litigating, going on my 13th year now of helping people optimize and make the best financial decisions that they can and really help them to rebuild their infrastructure, their financial infrastructure of their lives while they're going through the divorce case. So their plan is already built. So when the dust settles, when their case settles, their infrastructure is already built and they know during the mediation process, whatever deal is presented or wherever the negotiation leads, they know that they're going to be okay and they're going to be able to live the life that they want to live going forward.
Well, you bring up such an important point because fear is the big problem. Initially, once you get over that hope that things are going to change, right? Or, leave that up to the therapy conversations. But there is a lot of hope, hope that we can co-parent together, hope that the marriage really isn't as damaging, controlling, secretive, abusive, or just uncomfortable as we think it is. And it isn't always two people. But once you get past that hope, and now it's a matter of the reality check, right? There's that fear of, okay, now what? Because divorce is another word for change. Every aspect of your life will change. On one side, you've got the psychological, mental, emotional part, but on the other side, the judicial, legal, financial, residential, lending, insurance, taxes side, and that can really lead to a lot of fear, right? So if you have the right plan or options, it'll dissipate the fear a little bit. I'm not saying it goes away, but a client who sat in my little crying chair right there yesterday, she said, I feel so much better, and it's only been a week because I now have I know I have options and I now have a plan. So let's talk a little bit about how you wear all these different hats. You talked about being an expert witness to me earlier. What does that look like? And then being a CDFA, like, what do you do when you're a CDFA? And obviously, we know what an attorney does, but maybe not. Some people aren't sure. I get a lot of questions about, why would I need a lawyer? Like, what do they do? And many people make that mistake of using an attorney as a therapist. So we can talk about that later, but until they get the $6,000 bill and go, what? So, and then of course the financial aspect of it, so because you wear a lot of hats, can you kind of clarify those different buckets? And for people that maybe are green or rookies to this and don't really know what those different buckets look like.
Yeah, and Paula, there's a lot to unpack in your questions there, but I want to go back to something that you mentioned. You mentioned the word plan several times in your questions to me, and I want to tell you, look, for a decade, I've litigated high net worth divorce cases, and I find that family law attorneys, they're some of the best professionals that I've ever worked with in any context. Unfortunately for the clients, the best family law attorneys are incredibly busy. And I think one of the biggest frictions between clients and attorneys is the attorneys are so busy that some of them don't have the chance to sit down and really sort of start with the end in mind and develop a strategic plan. When you build a house, you meticulously plan, and I mean, and you think about what, all the myriad of decisions with fixtures in the bathroom and lights in the exterior, whatever. But that's not done in a divorce case. And so divorce lawyers are really good at helping their client get from beginning to end, but they don't show their work. It's sort of like doing a long division problem with just punching the problem into the calculator and showing you, here you go, Paulette, here's the answer. But I find that the clients really want to follow along and they want to know, okay, you're asking me for this, but why? And then what comes next? And how can I best work with you? So I found that when I was practicing, and I know your listeners are from multiple jurisdictions, but if I had a case that was going to trial, what I would do, what I found the best method to help me prepare to try a case was to draft a result, a final judgment, a divorce decree that came from a judge. So I would know all the witnesses that were going to testify, what I needed them to say, what evidence needed to come into the record, why it was important. And going through that exercise would help me put together my trial notebook and figure out which witnesses I wanted to call at what period of time. So I think, and I'll tell you what, I gained such a powerful, trust relationship with the clients from the outset because they understand. And by the way, I am an attorney, but I'm not in a situation where I'm giving the clients legal advice, but helping them understand the process and procedure, I think really helps to sort of pull back the curtain on this mysterious process that oftentimes the clients don't get when they just go to a lawyer. And that's why your clients love you so much. And that's the value that you bring to your clients, Paulette.
Well, I love that you use the word plan because it is essential. I like to call it a blueprint, hence why I call it Better Divorce Blueprint. You wouldn't build a house, as you said clearly, Patrick. You used the analogy of building a house. Could you imagine building a house without a blueprint? It would be a puddle of mud. You would maybe it would be like, was that the Three Little Pigs? Which house stood the longest? Was it the brick, the hay, and I forget the other one, wood, right? But you wouldn't do it, and now you're depending on having your entire future without really having a plan. Many people just go into it blind. They put down a retainer with an attorney and say, go get him, tiger. And there's no plan. And that's a great analogy too of the math, because I agree with you. If you were to not show your work and you would just have a math equation and you gave the answer, I had many as a teacher that would not give you a correct uh, answer on your test or quiz or exam because you didn't show how you got the answer, right? And I don't know that it's the same way with divorce, but many clients are frustrated and scared to death and kind of angry or resentful. And I've seen it all, trust me, as a coach. I work with them, but they were like, well, why do I have to do that? Like you said, well, especially with the domestic relations financial affidavit, cash, what's cash? No one has cash anymore. And is that the $20 bill in your wallet? Yes, but it might also be that you've got, cash stored somewhere. Maybe some things are liquid, and of course, all the way down to investments, retirement accounts, and real estate, and vehicles, and even the $10,000. What's that thing called? A jura. you know, people will argue over the silliest things: coffee tables, furniture, jewelry, art, and even sometimes debt. Right? It's just this never-ending cycle of fear and not having a plan. So, with your perspective on the process, because you have so much, um, 360-degree, shall we say, viewpoint, right? Perspective. Where do you find that most people make the most mistakes besides not having a plan? Is there anything really like that you see consistently people overlook?
Really good question. I think that, people who do cases on their own don't want to involve lawyers, or maybe they, go to a collaborative process. They don't spend the time in the discovery and getting all of the puzzle pieces. Let's say I like to talk about discovery as being puzzle pieces. Let's say you have a 1,000 piece puzzle, and you know that if you had 800 pieces, you can say, hey, that's a picture of an elephant. But if you only have 650 pieces, you may not be able to say whether that's a skyscraper or an elephant. So I think there are things that people can ask for. Sort of part and parcel with that is really understanding the tax consequences in these more complicated cases. Highly compensated executives have different, golden handcuffs or compensation plans that aren't available to the rank and file workers. So some pension plans are not subject to ERISA. So lawyers just often assume that they all are, and they're all divisible with a post-divorce qualified domestic relations order, and that may not be the case. So, doing the work up front on each asset. What is this? Is it a asset that has already been taxed? Has the tax not been paid on it? Is it deferred compensation? So are there payroll taxes associated with this? How do we divide it? Is it divisible? If it's not divisible, what other assets do we use to offset that? And then what if that spouse doesn't do what they're supposed to do? Said another way, hold up their end of the bargain. How do we enforce that? So, you know, going piece by piece and looking at each asset individually and answering those questions with each asset, I think is really where people, a lot of people just take an Excel spreadsheet, throw everything in there and divide by two. And, that oftentimes doesn't get us to where we need to be.
It can be really complicated in high asset cases. And of course, what's the definition of high asset? To some people, that could be, I don't know, $500,000. And to others, it's, 1.5 billion. I mediate cases all the way to, well, debt. We'll talk about debt. Sometimes there's more debt than there are assets, unfortunately. And all the way to the highest case I've done is 1.5 billion.
Wow.
I'm okay with not doing more than that. I'll probably pass that on to a few. I bring a lot of team members in when it really does get that complex. And sometimes there's prenuptial agreements and postnuptial agreements, and that's a whole nother conversation, Patrick, right? But I'd like to talk a little bit about how that puzzle piece that you mentioned, that was such a beautiful analogy, because I'm a visual person. In my head, I'm immediately seeing that 1,000 piece puzzle that I would rather get a root canal than do. I hate puzzles. But hey, to those people that like to sit around and play with cardboard, knock yourself out. I would rather play golf or, I don't do something else. But it's a great analogy. But you can't complete the puzzle if you don't have the pieces, right? You just don't. There's so many missing numbers. And most people, at least 75%, procrastinate about filling out the damn paperwork because it's so overwhelming. And if you have minor children and you see that and you have to do a budget for child A and B and C and D, and if you have more than that, God bless you. And then, of course, you've got to do the assets, not who's getting what, but just listing them. And most people are somewhat in the dark. The person doesn't think it's theirs. And there's like, well, I made the money and it's my 401k, damn it. And well, it's my salary and my whatever the heck it is. And, another expletive. Not like, well, there's premarital assets, non-marital assets, and marital assets, and what's what, and then what's the gray area and all that. But the procrastination will make that case linger because you cannot come to a resolution. Well, a wise resolution, right? You can come
Right.
to a resolution if both parties will sign off onto it. I wouldn't suggest it, but hey, if you're not litigating and you two want to come up with an agreement, you both can live with it, then maybe that's another conversation. But if you're litigating, you have the accountability of opposing counsel to force the other side to comply and say, well, I don't even know what's in the checking account. How can I agree to what that division looks like if I don't even know that we have an account, right? So
Right.
that avoidance can be a big problem. And that's kind of where I come in too. It's like, helping them deal with the fear of, well, if I tell them I have this, so example, I have a client, she goes, so I have like this, like, I don't know, some money stashed aside and he doesn't know about it. Do I have to put it on the JARFA? If you're listening to the audio, both of us are smiling, but so what do I mean, obviously we know the answer to that, but it's hard, right? Because there's so much arm wrestling and tug of warring and negotiating and anger and resentment and about assets and money. And how do you get somebody, I mean, I know, but anybody listening, how do you get them to understand that assets that are created throughout the marriage likely are marital, and yes, they have to be shared, right? It's a jagged little pill to swallow.
So Paulette, if you came to me and with that perspective, I would just say, look, neither your lawyer nor we're not the ones who wrote these laws and passed them. We just have to help you comply with them. And in Florida, we also call it a financial affidavit. So
Right.
some people who didn't work outside the home and raise the kids, they get this financial affidavit. They have no idea what they spend. They have no idea how much some of their assets are worth. So I'd say, okay, Paulette, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? The financial affidavit has 4 sections: your income, your expenses, your assets, and your liabilities. Okay, so let's break them down one piece at a time. You're at home with the children. You're not working outside the home. So your income, 0. Great. You're done with 25% of the financial affidavit. Okay, then the assets, list all the assets. If you know what they're worth, you can write them down. If you don't know what they're worth, you can, write unknown and put a little footnote next to it and say, when discovery is completed, you'll file an amended financial affidavit and you'll supply the answer. Or if a business needs to be appraised, you'll get that answer. So if you don't know, you don't have to be paralyzed by the fact that you don't know something. You can say, I have this asset, so you're disclosing it. I'm not sure what the value is. And when I get the value, I'll be happy to tell you, Judge. And then same thing with the debts. If you know the balance of a liability, like, the balance of a note with a bank that you used to buy your house, you can list it. Or you could say it's approximately $400,000. with a footnote and say, once my ex-husband who took all our financial documents and won't give me the passwords, once I get a hold of them, I'll update it. But right now, I think it's around $400,000, and that's the best I can do. Then I will tell you, okay, Paulette, the most important job you have in your entire case, the best way that you can help your lawyer is try to figure out how many dollars leave your house every month and where do they go. That is the one thing that I want you to focus on for the next 2 months. Can you do that?
And most say, I don't want to do it. It's too exhausting and too painful, and I hate it.
Then I'll say, okay, Paulette, I agree. I would not want to do that if I were you. Unfortunately, here we are. Will you let me help you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like an avoidance thing, right?
Sure.
Like the plague, so I don't want to touch it. I don't want to think about it. Can't you just make my lawyer, make this all go away? And yeah, there's so much fear because there's a general disconnect between understanding that marriage is a legal binding contract. It's not about a dress and a tuxedo and a cake and a party known as a wedding and a vacation known as a honeymoon. And you don't mean to ruin the romantic bubble, everyone, but you're agreeing to enter into a legally binding contract. And for whatever reason, if the marriage does not last, does not work, no judgment, statistically speaking, about 40 to 50% of first marriages will end in divorce at some point in the marriage. I don't mean the first year, could be the 30th year, there's a long span, but that's a lot of people. And trust me, the statistics are not better for second and third marriages. So if we're dealing with just demographics or numbers, right? Like how many people get married and how many people will get divorced? A lot of people feel like I'm the loser and I'm broken and I'm rejected and what did I do? And of course, having to go through the stages of grieving. But there is that, overall fear or disconnect. But they truly do not understand that you can't put your head in the sand because you're in this legal binding contract. And if for whatever reason, as I said, whatever the reason is, if you want to end the marriage, the only way to end the marriage is to enter into yet again another legal binding contract and known as a divorce. And there's a very systematic procedural process, right, of having to end that. Now, there are different methods and, every case is hugely different, just like every marriage. But most people see it as this like romantic notion of like, okay, we're married and okay, we're going to get a divorce. And they just don't understand it. It's very easy to get married, Patrick. Too damn easy, right? But it's not so easy to get divorced. Yeah, and it's hard to see it that way, having that perspective on it.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about your book, because Patrick is also an author. It's called Move Forward Confidently. Great title. Tell me a little bit about it.
Sure. I'm glad you asked. So it's been more than 4 years now that my book was published. And as we've talked about, I have 10 years of doing the litigation and, more time than that, helping people get a plan, get coordinated, get out of the divorce process as efficiently as possible. And I decided that I wanted to write a book to pull back the curtain and demystify the process for somebody who maybe this is their only experience with the legal system. And I mean, Paulette, I start with some very basic things like how do you pick a lawyer? And then once you pick a lawyer, how do you work with the lawyer? What's the best way to work with the lawyer? And at the end of each chapter, I, sort of leave 3 bullet points. Like, hey, if you don't remember anything in the preceding 5 pages, remember these 3 things. And then each chapter, when I talk about just kicking off the case, filing the petition, I have a flow chart that sort of corresponds with each chapter and helps them understand where they are in the process. The analogy I use in the book is like the kiosk at the shopping mall where it says you are here, right? You're standing by the Dunkin' Donuts, and I use the Dunkin' Donuts because you're from Boston and you love Dunkin'. But you're trying to get to Dillard's, and you know that on your way to
There's
get to
no Dillard's
Dillard's.
in Boston. I know.
Okay, well,
I'm just teasing. It's fine.
Neiman Marcus, whatever. But you know that in order to get from Dunkin' to Neiman Marcus, you're going to have to pass all of these other stores. And if you pass the jewelry store and you pass the, the place that sells all the soaps and the perfumes and the bath bombs and stuff like that, you're on the right track, right? And if you're not passing those things, maybe it's time to go back to the map and see where you got off track.
You might be lost.
But I even do such things as I have a glossary in the back of the book. So you and I have many years of experience, and we may use terms that may fly right over somebody's head. But I try to say, wait, I know that I may be throwing terms around that may get you confused. So my book has a glossary, and I bold the terms of art. So you know that, hey, that's a special word. You need to go back in the glossary that you have to go back and look it up. And then I even have a checklist for things that you're supposed to do at the end of your case. So I wrote the book. You mentioned that you have a workbook also. My book it's not quite a workbook per se, but I want it to be like, at your fingertips, and you should be able to flip through it, break it open, and really demystify the process and feel better about the whole thing after you read my book.
Perfect. And what I love about it is that you donate the proceeds to the Northeast Florida Domestic Violence Shelter.
Yes.
I'm on the board of a domestic violence group called the Divorce Coalition. So I do work with some women in situations where they feel coercive control, and they're very completely scared of the process because of that manipulation. So kudos to you for that. So,
well, thank you. And, I want your listeners to know, while we were chatting before we started recording, you talked about you do what you do because you like to give back. This project of writing the book was also my way of giving back. So as you said, 100% of the net proceeds from the book go to the Hubbard House, which is our local domestic violence shelter. And just sort of putting this knowledge out in the universe, whether somebody works with me or eventually becomes a client, if I can help people make what could be a really nasty process as good of an experience as possible and get them on their way, help preserve a relationship with the family unit, that's what my mission is. Perfect. And I love it.
I can tell. Most people know I love what I do too. They're like, you're a little enthusiastic. So, what is the best way for people to learn more about you, follow you, get to know you, and potentially book a call with you or even work with you?
Sure. Thank you for asking. The best way is to go to our website. You mentioned Ullmann. It's spelled ULLMANN, wealthpartners.com. We have a lot of resources on the website. And, I generally, my first meeting with anybody is on the house. And you mentioned I've clients from all over. I'm involved in a divorce case in London as we speak. And we have our intake form is called a confidential discovery questionnaire. And what I ask people to do, and I'm not trying to pre-qualify anybody, but Paulette, you're busy. You've got a lot going on. When we meet, I like to have that information filled out so I already know your address, your birthday, how many children you have, what their names are, what their birthday. So I'm not wasting your time or mine, and we can just get right to the heart of the matter, and I can get you on your way. And look, if you're in Bismarck, North Dakota, and I need to find you a lawyer in Bismarck that's the right person to help you with your divorce. So you may not have kids, or your kids may be already of the age of majority. So maybe the issue in your case is valuing a closely held corporation and trying to figure out whether this is an alimony case. All right, let's find the most sophisticated, respected attorney who likes to handle those cases, because you know better than anybody, Paulette, Some lawyers want to handle the custody and they don't like the money issues. And then there's some lawyers that don't like the custody issues and only want to deal with the money.
Very,
So
very, very true, Patrick. Yes.
yeah, so I mean, if you have a size 6 foot, I want to find you the appropriate shoe that's going to fit your foot and be most appropriate for whatever occasion you want that shoe for. Is it going to be rock climbing or is it going to be to wear at a wedding? I mean, these are all. So we want to find that lawyer that's the perfect fit for your situation.
And matching your personality to them too, just your communication style and their mode of communication and responsiveness. Some people really do need a different level of communication than others. Yeah, others are a little more hands off. A lot of them are like more accountability and involved attorneys and clients. And also, of course, depending on where you live in your state and all that, as Patrick clearly mentioned, and not to pick on Bismarck, but attorneys are location driven, right? So I have clients in 43 states right now. So I'm not location centric. So no matter where you live, I've even helped clients in New Zealand, Australia, UK, Canada, and I lived in Belize for 3 years. So quite a few people and expats that live in Central America. And of course, the good old USA. So with that said, but there are many attorneys that are amazing litigators, cross-examiners, man, bring it on. They love to be in the courtroom. They love the drama and the interviews and the exhibits and the stickers and the whole, thing. And others just are great paper pushers. Like, man, can they write documents and motions and contempt and hearings, but they don't really like to go to court. You've got to pick the right person. Like you said, if the share is size 6, you need to find an attorney that's a size 6.
Right. And to take that even a little further, so take my home state, Florida. So, if somebody has a case in Miami and they say, well, I know this lawyer in Jacksonville, they're excellent. I mean, the laws are the same in Miami as they are in Jacksonville. I'm just going to have my friend in Jacksonville try the case in Miami. And what I would say is in Florida, there are 67 counties. And within each county, there may be a number of family judges within that county. So Duval County, where I'm at, there are 7 different family judges. And while the rules of procedure and the statutes are the same, each judge has their own, instructions in their division. They want the exhibits marked maybe 48 hours ahead of time. And, let's be honest, we're all human. I've never been in front of a judge where I think that, just because they hire this lawyer that they're going to, win the case. But there are lawyers that, the judges respect. And there are some lawyers that have, got into it with the judge, for example. And you need to know those things. I mean, it's a very human process.
Yes, and there's a trust, know, like, and trust value when it comes to the judicial kind of energy there. Like I said, the attorney knows the judge knows the attorney. They're familiar. There's a sense of, I've worked with this. Presented a case before this judge before, and they kind of know their demeanor and their energy. So not to say that you have to use a particular attorney for that particular judge, but you're very correct, Patrick. So that is important if you're going to trial and you're having hearings, and you need to be aware of that energy between an attorney and a judge. Now, if you can avoid all that, great. Some cases can. I'm able to make the MOA with the couple, create a binding agreement, hand it to a transactional attorney who transitions the MOA into the necessary court required documents and submits it for the couple. So, some don't panic, everyone. If you're like trial, not everyone goes to trial. 97% of cases do not go to trial. So that's a big number, 97%. I should know because 3% do, and only 1% of that 3% goes to the appeals court. And unfortunately, that was me.
Well, and Paulette, if I have a client in Peachtree City and they say, "Hey, who are the good mediators?" and I said, "Look, I've had a number of clients that have mediated with Paulette, and she's excellent. And you, as the mediator, you know which lawyers show up prepared, show up organized, and again, you're going back and forth from one party to the other, trying to help them settle. And when you have a lawyer that consistently comes in to your mediation conference that has the client prepared, that knows the rules, that's organized, that can help make things efficient. Whereas, and I'm sure you've had this before, where some lawyers don't even talk to the other lawyer and they're using your mediation process as sort of a discovery case management conference, and that really doesn't serve the purpose. So, no, having practice, I know who the good mediators are, who are the ones who will work the case, who can get it settled, and what lawyers work well and have the respect of that mediator. That all goes into this process.
You're so correct. So don't hesitate to reach out to Patrick if you have any interest in or concern or questions for him. As he mentioned, Ullman Wealth Partners. And don't forget to check out his book, Move Forward Confidently. Well, I'm going to wrap this up and remind everyone that you have to make it better. It doesn't have to be as bad as you think. So until next time, make it better. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye, Patrick.
Bye.